We are middle of discussing now the second Ikar, where about Achdus Hashem. We went through all the different Pirushim, and then we came to the Baal Shem Tov's Pirush, that Hashem is Echad, mean he's the only existence. The Alter Rebbe, when he wrote the Tanya, he begins the Sharblat, the introduction, first page. The Alter Rebbe writes that the Tanya is based on a pasuk in the Torah, where it's Moshe Rabbeinu in the name of Hashem is saying, Lo b'shamayim hi, the Torah is not up in the sky, v'lo me'ever layam, it's ki karov elecha hadava mi'ayit. It's very close. What does it mean close? It probably means not fit. Of course, it doesn't mean physically close. We're not talking about space. It probably means it's very possible. It's very accessible. It's not something impossible. It is very possible. So the Alter Rebbe says, my sefer that I'm writing is to explain what does Hashem mean that Torah and mitzvahs is to keep Torah and mitzvahs 24/7, every second of the, it's karov miyot. Everyone knows how difficult it is to do everything what Hashem wants. And here the Hashem says, it's karov elecha hadava miyot. So the Alter Rebbe writes, I'm going to explain it. Levaya b'derech arucha uketzara. What does that mean? It could mean one of two things. It could mean that I'm going to present to you, to the readers, a long, short way. Why is it called long, short? It's based on a Gemara that the Gemara talks about, that there could be sometimes a road that looks like it's long, but that's the road that you can get there. Where there could be another kind of a road, it looks like it's very, very short, but it's so complicated that you could get stuck somewhere. So the Alter Rebbe is saying, I am going to explain what Hashem meant, karov elecha hadava miyot, in the long, short way. What long, short way? Because the Alter Rebbe, as we all know, his shitta was that you need to use your own brain. The only way that you could really change thoroughly is when you yourself understand the greatness of Hashem, and you meditate and you contemplate on the, and then it gets to your heart, and from your heart to actions. So really, it has to start from your own brain. And because of, and of course, the advantage is that when you yourself are convinced, then you become a different, you could really become a different person. Where when you only have emunah, as we mentioned already earlier, a person could believe and could contradict himself 10 times a day. The Gemara gives an example, like a ganef, right before he makes a holdup, he could pray to Hashem, I should be successful and no one should catch me. You're believing in Hashem and you're asking him for success in going against what he wants. We don't internalize. Belief is something esoteric. You could believe, but you don't even realize what you believe and what the consequences of it. The Alter Rebbe said the only way that a person really could change his whole personality is if he first learns about the Eibishter, spends enormous time learning of the Eibishter, of course, contemplating, and eventually it will get to your heart, and then it will get to your whole personality. So the Alter Rebbe's method is the long, short way. It's longer because I have to first learn, and there's a lot to learn. And then there's a lot to work on and to contemplate. So it's a longer road, but the end is that you get to the final destination of what Hashem really wanted us, how he wanted us to change our whole being to love him. There's one other possibility that the Alter Rebbe is really giving us two roads, the long road and a short road. In other words, to translate b'derech arucha, and I'm also going to give you a derech katsara. What would that mean? So in the Tanya alone, the derech arucha is explained from the Perek Aleph till Perek Yud Ches. However, from Perek Yud Ches till Chaf Vav, that is called the derech katsara, as we'll soon explain. That kind of what the Alter Rebbe suggests from Perek Yud Ches till Chaf Vav is not so much about a great meditation, contemplation, avodah with your moyach. He presents a whole different story, and we'll talk about it soon, but basically how the Alter Rebbe presents that the whole Yiddishkeit is basically either you're connected to me or you're totally disconnected. There's no middle. The whole Judaism, the Ramach Mitzvahs Aseh, the 248 positive commandments, is about connecting to Hashem. And the Loisa says the 365 things that we're not allowed to do. What's the issue? God forbid, you totally depart from Hashem. And Alter Rebbe from Perek Yud Ches till Chaf Vav actually demonstrates that every time Chas v'Shalom a person doesn't do what Hashem wants, what's the issue? It's very strong, but he does say it very clear. It adds up to just like idol worship. Just like Chas v'Shalom, if a person bows down to an avodah zarah, the Yid, every Yid, or 99% of the Yidden would give up their lives not to worship a avodah zarah. Why? Because they feel that this means I'm no longer Jew. The Alter Rebbe explains that every time a person doesn't listen to Hashem, if it's a rabbinical commandment, if it's a biblical commandment, every mitzvah, every loisese, if you don't do it, you are, at the moment that you're doing it, you are totally disconnected. You became a guy for a second. It's like shmad. And we'll soon maybe talk about it. But in short, the Alter Rebbe brings this out so strong, so powerful, that why did the Klal Yisrael only hear from Hashem the first two commandments? Alter Rebbe says, because that's all you need. Everything is in those two commandments. Anochi Hashem Elokecha is about being connected to the Eibishter, and the second commandment, not to worship idols, that's basically all of the negative commandments. And Alter Rebbe talks, how much time, I don't know, we have now, but what he says is that every time that a Yid does anything against Hashem, at that moment, there's no difference between Avodah Zarah or the small thing that you aren't supposed to do. You're totally disconnected from Hashem. And therefore, if a person could always work on this and always be aware that the issue is not about later, it's not about afterlife, it's not about Gan Eden, Gehenim, there's a whole different issue. Am I connected or am I totally disconnected? And every Yid, says the Alter Rebbe, every Yid is ready not to lose that he's a Yid, that he shmat, God forbid. No Yid would do that. We need to realize that that's what a lo sesa is. What is a essa is to connect forever, or chas v'sholem, or totally disconnect. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe is saying, Hashem said it's karai veilecha hadava miyad. It's very possible to be from a Yid 24/7. How could that be? You need to get this into your head. It's a whole mindset. There's a lot to understand, but if you could only remember that that's the issue all the time. No Yid wants to lose his connection, and every Yid wants to be connected, then it'll be. That's when Hashem said it's karai veilecha hadava miyad. Of course it's karai. If you have this packed into your head, and you always remind yourself about it, it will be karai veilecha hadava me'ot. So therefore, there are two different ways that the Alter Rebbe suggests. One is till Perek Yud Ches, that's the Arucha, and the short is what we just mentioned, from Yud Ches till Chaf Vav. But I need now to give another introduction. We discussed from the class, from the beginning of our shiurim, we discussed that it's two separate mitzvahs. One is Emunah, and the second, the Rambam himself says, the second commandment in his order is unity of Hashem, that Hashem is Echad. The Alter Rebbe begins in Perek, in the Dis Parakim, and he says that it's not two mitzvahs, it's really one mitzvah. It's based on a Zohar. The Alter Rebbe would not say this on his own, but the Zohar says that the Emunah is more the general idea, and to go in specifics of this Emunah is the Emunah in his Achdus. This is very, very powerful. Why? Because everyone knows, every Jew knows, Emunah in Hashem, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, these are the first commandment. And if a person is against the first commandment, it means he's against the whole everything. He has nothing. The Alter Rebbe brings this Zohar. He doesn't quote the Zohar, but he brings this idea that the Emunah is in his unity. What does that mean? That the fact that Hashem is the only existence and there's nothing else that exists, that is a part of Emunah. This becomes very serious now. This means if a person doesn't have clearly Achdus Hashem in his mind, then he's missing Emunah. He's missing the basics of the whole religion. Everything is about the first commandment. And here the Zohar says, Achdus Hashem is a part, that's the detail of the Emunah. So every Yid wants to be sure in his mind, in his heart, that he's a believer. Now we're learning, you got to first know what you're believing. We're not just, of course, some people think that Emunah is that we believe that there is a God. We went through that already. That's for sure not the meaning. But now the Zohar goes so strong that believing in Hashem, that he is the only existence, that is the Emunah. So it behooves us, and every year that we know, we have a major chiyuv to care for our fellow Jew, to understand what do we believe? What is our belief? It's not about, it's another mitzvah, another detail. That's the whole Emunah of Hashem means I believe that there's no one besides him. But how does the Alter Rebbe go about talking about the unity of Hashem? And it's going to be very interesting of the relevance in every aspect of our life. When we discussed that the Alter Rebbe explains how Hashem has to create the world every second, and without that, the world doesn't have any existence, it still does not necessarily translate in every move that I make in life. As we're soon going to explain, the way the Alter Rebbe discusses this in these parakim, every move, everything in life is connected to, it might be avodah zarah, or it could be I'm connected to Hashem. But this everything is now we're going into very serious territory. Tell a Jew you did not make a bracha, or you said, God forbid, a bracha levatala. This is avodah zarah. You are a guy for a moment. This is very, very shocking. Life is getting very, very, it's serious, sensitive, and it's an offense in Hashem himself. And let me try to explain how the Alter Rebbe talks about the unity of Hashem in these parakim. The Alter Rebbe explains that avodah zarah doesn't necessarily mean I bow down to an idol, to a picture, to a dummy, a mummy. If Hashem means that he is the only presence and everything else has no value in his presence, nothing has any value. If a Yid gives any value to anything else but Hashem, in a very delicate way, he's denying Hashem. It's avodah zarah. In Hashem's presence, this is it's not anything. And to you, you regard this as something important to you. You value it. Your value, God says it doesn't have no value. And you say, and you act, this does have a value. So what's the problem? Then it's avodah zarah. You're giving attention, you're giving value in the presence of Hashem where that has no value, and you say, no, it does have value. As value means you're denying his presence. This is far out. We know, and I think we discussed this, hu levadai hu, v'yein zulasai, is really what the essence of Tanya is. It's not only Hashem, he's infinite, he's eternal, he's a kol yachol, that doesn't cost any money. I could give Hashem all the credit. I'm not planning to be God. I never thought I was God. He's fantastic. But when I learn that Hashem also means that there's nothing besides him, now he's entering into my whole life. He's coming into my territory. To me, I am very, very important. There's no one more important to me than me, and everything I like, and everything that my whole life. That's an offense to Hashem. Hashem says he's the only existence, and you give yourself very much attention as another big existence. Capital I, then it's a head-on collision. Hashem says, I am the only existence, and I say, I am the only existence. This is only in Hasidus could you come up with something like that. I just heard, I was just in Crown Heights 2 days ago, and I heard in the name of a great chassid called Reb Shmuel Levitin. I still remember him many years ago. He was a very wise, great chassid, still in the time of the Rebbe Rashab. And he used to teach Bachrim even from different yeshivas. And he once said the following, that once you learn Hasidus, there's only either it's a mitzvah or it's the opposite of a mitzvah. There's no divrei reshus. We know that there are things that you're mechuyev to do, there are things that you're not allowed to do, and then there is this seemingly a third category, divrei reshus. It's not a mitzvah, but it's not an aveira. So, how is it categorized in the world of the Torah world? It's reshus. I have the permission to do it. Of course, it's not a mitzvah, but it's not an aveira. In Hasidus, there's no such a thing as a divrei reshus. How could it be a divrei reshus? If you consider that something valuable to you, that's avodah zarah. You have no right to just deal with it and enjoy it, or it's either it's against Hashem or it's a mitzvah. There's no in between. There is no such a thing as an in between. What are you going to do with it? If it's going to be done for Hashem's sake, it's a mitzvah. If it's, God forbid, going to be for your own sake and nothing to do with Hashem, it's avodah zarah. You're not allowed to do it. So, although it's printed in the Gemara, there is such a word, our definition, divrei reshus. The answer is, what the Gemara means is before you do anything with it, before you come in contact with the divrei reshus, there definitely is. There are things that are kosher, there are things that are not kosher, and the things that are kosher are reshus. You're allowed to eat it, it's kosher. However, the moment that you put that food in your mouth, you don't have reshus just to eat it. You got to eat it for Hashem's sake, to be healthy, to help give you koyach to learn, to daven, to do mitzvahs. But if I just eat it because I enjoy it, it's forbidden. And not only is it forbidden, it's equal to avodah zarah. You're giving it value. To you, this is valuable. I enjoy it. Well, guess what? There is only God. If you value this, what are you saying? You're saying exactly what's the opposite of the truth. To you, this is valuable. Valuable. I mean, we could go on, and Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya that if a person eats not l'shem shamayim, he eats because he likes it, he's creating major problems. He's adding energy of klippah to the world. He's bringing the food that he ate on a lower level than it was before he ate it, because now the food assisted the person to do something that he shouldn't have done. Very interesting. There's no such a thing as middle ground. I'm not doing an aveira, it's not a mitzvah, I'm just doing it. There's no such a thing as just doing it. If it's to serve Hashem, it's a mitzvah. If it has nothing to do with Hashem, it just has to do with you felt like eating it, or you like eating it, or whatever, that means that you're giving it value. How could you give it value when it's Hashem's right here, and in His presence this has no value? That means you're denying His presence. So getting back to the ranch. The Alter Rebbe says in these prakim, unbelievable. What he said in these prakim, to Hashem, everything, kulei kamei, everything in his presence has no value. If you give it value, you're denying his presence. It's called avodah zarah in Chinese. Avodah zarah doesn't mean only a dummy and a mummy. You're giving some value to something that in Hashem's presence, it has no value. And you're saying it does have value. That means that you're denying his presence. Let me give a few examples. We all know that in the Torah, there's a special mitzvah of respecting a melech. And if God forbid, you in front of the melech, you do something that's disrespectful, the king, we're talking about a Jewish king, a firmer of Eid, if you show any disrespectfulness in front of him, the king has a right to execute you because you are a moired b'malchus. It goes to such a point that in the presence of a melech, if you give any attention to a general in the presence of the king, that's also called a moired b'malchus. Why? In the presence of the melech, that's all there is. If you are giving respect to general, it's called moired b'malchus. So if we take this in our lives, if we give anything value, it's equivalent to avodah zarah. Now, if a person chas v'shalom does a real avera, there's nothing worse, because that means he's going against he's in the presence of Hashem, and he's going against him. That's avodah zarah 10 times worse. So in conclusion, which is so interesting, the Alter Rebbe explains that if you could work on yourself to understand what means Hashem Echad, and that is the whole foundation of belief in Hashem. This has to be always we have to remind ourselves probably a few hundred times a day. But Alter Rebbe says, if you get it, what I am telling you here, how I'm presenting it, it's going to be very possible 24/7 to do everything that Hashem wants. Why? Because you are willing even to give up your life not to worship an idol. Every Jew is ready to do that. You just don't realize that every lo sesa is the same. That's the difference. You just don't realize that really there's no difference. But once you get it, once you smell the coffee, and you understand, because it has to be thought through. If you understand that in reality there is no difference, then you'll be so careful in every moment in your life. Either I'm connected or I'm totally disconnected. And the Alter Rebbe says, something very interesting. How come Jews are willing to give up their lives not to worship idols? They know that you could do tshuva. And if they do tshuva, they'll be forgiven. So what do they have to lose? God forbid, they'll bow down to the idol, and I'll do tshuva. Says the Alter Rebbe, amazing. No Jew will make that consideration, because the idea of disconnecting to Hashem is not something negotiable. No Jew would even for 1 second, knowing that he could do tshuva 5 minutes later, but no Jew would be willing to disconnect completely to Hashem for 5 minutes. It's beyond time. It's nothing to do with time. It's a fact. If that's what it does to me, I just can't do it. I can't. So the Alter Rebbe says, then that's really the whole religion. You just got to remind yourself constantly that there really is no difference. And the Alter Rebbe says the following. There is a Gemara, I'm sure everybody heard this Gemara. The Gemara says, Ein Adam over Avera. No Jew would be able to commit a sin unless a ruach of shtus, of insanity, got into him. Very strange Gemara. In other words, the Gemara is saying that when you did this Avera, you are insane. Because if you had your pegs in your holes, if you had it would be impossible for you to sin. So how is it possible that you did it? You must have, for a moment, you became insane. How? Why? Says the Alter Rebbe. So interesting. The insanity is that you think it's a difference between avodah zarah and a regular avera. It's insane, because really there is no difference. But if you could think that there is a difference, you don't feel that it's the same. It's because you are not playing with a full deck. Would have you realized that it is the same, you would never be able to commit a sin. This is so enlightening. Because no one could understand the Gemara. The Gemara says, Ruach Shtus, no one who considers themselves insane, you would get insulted if somebody told you that. You would say, I beg your pardon. Gemara says that. There is no way that you could ever do an Avera unless you are insane for that moment. So the Alter Rebbe says exactly what's going on. If you could think or you could feel that there is a difference, that's insane, because there really is no difference. So let's summarize what we learned today. That the idea of Hashem Echad, as we started already last week, I believe, and we said there are 2 approaches how Hashem is Echad. One was because constantly Hashem has to create everything, and therefore without Hashem it does nothing. And then we said there's another approach. And the other approach is because in the presence of Hashem, nothing else exists. The second part that we just now spoke has a very much, this is really hits home in the whole understanding of Yiddishkeit, how every move that I do, it's about, I'm on a tightrope. Either I'm connected or am I disconnected? There's no middle road. So the Alter Rebbe, and he calls it, according to one opinion, it's Ketzara. It's a short road. You just got to get it. You don't have to do a major contemplation. Of course, you need to use your head. You need to figure this out, why it makes sense that it is Avodah Zarah. But when you could always keep this in mind, you got to always refresh in this. You got to, it's not easy. But if you can always be aware, either I'm for him or I'm against him, and against him in the worst way, then it's going to be Korev Alecha Hadava Me'od. The only thing I don't understand, but this is just, so this means that Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem speaking in the name of Moshe, and he was talking to the Jews who are supposed to be knowing this Prakim of Tanya, which was not exactly around in times of Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to all the Jews of all generations. If you learn Tanya and you figure out that the whole religion is either you're connected or you're totally disconnected, then it's going to be very possible every moment of the day to do what Hashem says. So this is very important. I think we learned a lot today. I do suggest for all the listeners to learn again and again the prakim from 18 till 26, because first the Alter Rebbe talks, who are we? We have a neshama, and the neshama cannot depart from God. That's our essence. Every Yid has that. He has a very clear system how he makes it accessible for every Yid. Learn these prakim, get it. It's a short way to keep Torah and mitzvahs and a way of its korav adava meyot. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask.
Hello, Rabbi Gurary. This is
Yes. This is who?
Baruch Lipschitz' wife.
Good evening. How are you?
Baruch Hashem. We enjoy your classes.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to ask you a question. Something which I just like some clarification. You talk about that there's nothing else aside from Hashem. And how does it come in that we have free choice?
This
Do we
is
have
a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful question. It happens to be this whole issue of free choice is one of the most complex concepts in Hasidus. So don't feel bad if you need clarification. I think everyone needs clarification. I'm just going to present to you some ideas, and I'm sure it's not complete, but it's some tools to use. In your question, there are several issues. If you're asking, how can, if Hashem is doing everything, coming all from Hashem, then why are we responsible? Why do we get punished for doing, God forbid, something against Hashem? It was all Him. Is that a part of your question?
Sure, for sure.
Okay. So this is a very, very good question, because we definitely believe there is nothing that we can do on our own. Hashem has to do everything. Not only He knows what we're doing, He's the one that does it. Hashem's knowing makes it happen, not he knows after the fact. His knowing is how he creates everything, how he does everything by his knowing. So how can Hashem make us do something that he doesn't want us to do? This is a very, very deep question. Good question. Some of the answers to this question, or some of the details, is every time, God forbid, we don't do what Hashem wants us to do, we are going to do tshuva on every aveir chas v'sholem that we do. Either we do it in this lifetime, or we're going to have to come back again and again. We are going to correct every mistake that we made. And when we correct it, we're going to get even closer to Hashem than how we were before we ever made the mistake. Every Aveira will lead to tshuva, and not only tshuva, a tshuva that's going to will be even closer. So, as far as Hashem is concerned, of course he did it, but he did it because this is going to lead you to even greater. Now, the person can never, chas v'sholem, say, well, Hashem made me do it. That's not true. You did not feel whatsoever that Hashem was pushing you to that. You are totally to be blamed because you, with your own free will, decided to do whatever you want to do. You are totally responsible for every act, because whatever Hashem does with you is like remote control. You will never feel that he's the one doing it. So the person deserves a reward for doing a mitzvah, because with his own effort, his own controlling himself, straining himself, he earns a reward, because in his mind and his awareness, it was all him. On the other hand, the question is, but you can't do it on your own. Hashem has to create every aspect of it. He has to create you. He has to create your will. There's nothing that you could do unless he is doing it. So I'm answering you. One part of the answer is that Hashem, he has a different cheshbon. Every aveiva chas v'sholem that a yid's going to do, he's going to eventually have to do tshuva. And when he's going to do tshuva, he's going to be even closer. So it's really, Hashem doesn't work against himself. It's going to lead him even closer to Hashem. There's but another part of it that needs to be clarified. But how can we understand at the moment of the sin? A sin means going against Hashem. How could Hashem go against himself? The outcome, so we answered, it's going to lead later to getting even closer. But still does not answer at the moment that a person, chas v'sholem, goes against God. Hashem is going against himself? How do you figure that out? That part of the question has a different answer. We cannot, because we are finites, we cannot in any shape or form comprehend Hashem's existence. But Hashem's existence is an infinite existence that Hashem could be in something that goes against him. How? Because Hashem is not limited to anything. So he can go against his will and make you sin. How? We can't compare God to anything that we know. In logic, this is impossible. But Hashem doesn't have any rules. What to us is impossible is because we're finite. So Hashem, it says in Hasidus, a very interesting word. Hashem's mitzius, you speak Hebrew, I know you're in Israel, you know. He's a mitzius bilti nimtza. His existence is a non-existent. We have no way of understanding his existence. The kind of existence that Hashem is, we have no tools even to approach it. So Hashem could do these two things at the same time. He could do what?
Oh, it's a very good answer, because we're trying to understand Hashem in finite terms.
All right.
Yeah. So if you just accept the fact that you're not going to understand it, then that's already an explanation.
Right. Excellent. In other words, it's not even possible. You know, sometimes you say Hashem, he's so great that I can't figure him out. Then you're still putting Hashem in some kind of a category. I can't understand him, but maybe Moshe could understand him. He's not in the first place something that can be understood. Seichel is a finite science that he invented. He can't be limited to something that he himself invented. How can you understand Hashem, who created logic? That means he's beyond logic. So you're going to use logic to figure out someone that doesn't operate under logic. So what to us is impossible, to Hashem it's not, no problem. So in other words, Hashem is doing it. There's nothing could do anything without Hashem. How could he do something against himself? That's Hashem. He could. Why? So he will. So we have to get used to this whole idea. Who is this Hashem that we are talking about? He's not your next door neighbor. He's not 1,000,000,000 times greater than you. It's still not saying anything. It's it's a whole different kind of a being. It's very important, and it answers so many things. You know, I don't know if you were on when we talked about this. How many thousands and thousands of Jews asked, where was Hashem at the Holocaust? How could he do this? How could he do this? How could he do this? I'm sure you heard many, many people ask this question. One of the best answers to this question is, who are you trying to figure out? You got to be consistent. You're talking about Hashem. Hashem is the creator, not only of the mountains and of the valleys and of the planets Hashem created every science, every method, every concept is a creation. Logic is just a creation that he set up, a system of logic. But he cannot go under a system to ask, what is the logic for him to do something? How could he can't be doing something on a logic. He has to create the logic too. So the whole idea of asking how come, we got to be consistent. Who in the world are you questioning? A God who doesn't have, he's not limited to any system. He's not limited to space. He's not limited to time. He's not limited to logic. So how can you question someone like that? So it's not the problem that we are finite, so we can't figure out his greatness. It's beyond that. It's still saying nothing. When you put God in some category, even if you say he's 1,000,000,000 times greater than us, it's of course not much more than that. It's a whole different kind, it's a whole different God. You can't measure that. You can't mention infinity. Infinity means infinity.
Right. Yeah.
Okay?
Yes, thank you very much.
The bench you should be. Any other questions? Okay, everyone should have a good night and a good week, and we'll meet Hashem next week. We'll even out. 1 o'clock in America will be also 1 o'clock will be 8 o'clock in Israel. Sei gesund.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Bye-bye.